this guy is. He's some sort of pagan. We don't know which god specifically he's worshiping, but I took this image and I put it into Gemini and I was like, what's the language that's there at the bottom of the statue? And it was able to recognize it as.
Yeah, I think he was 100% helping set up all of that ambush and everything else. He's completely conflicted and corrupted and bought and sold by, whatever deal he's made.
He's doing like all these things that seem very nice, but he might have ulterior motives behind them, even if it's kind of hard at this point to see what exactly he's trying to achieve. Hi, my name's Kevin, and this is the Bible Artist podcast. And today we are going to be discussing and analyzing episode 3 of House of David season 2, which is coming out right now. And season 2 so far has been really great. We enjoyed discussing episodes 1 and 2. You can check out the 2 episodes that we did on them. And I'm also really looking forward to digging into a lot of cool biblical allusions in episode 3 and a lot of interesting kind of plotting and scheming going on. I'm joined as always by Victor, my co-host. If you have not checked out the Bible Artist before, it's a website, BibleArtist.com, where you can get all kinds of content related to Bible-based films and shows like House of David, like The Chosen, like Promised Land. There's so much that's happening right now, even just in the month of October. Season 2 of House of David, Promised Land's first full season, and then we've got The Chosen Adventures coming on down the pike. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world of Bible adaptation, so definitely check out the main website for analysis, reviews. I do Bible studies for all the different episodes of The Chosen and House of David, so lots of different great content for you to jump into. And I'm looking forward to discussing episode 3. Victor, do you want to share any kind of big picture thoughts on the episode? And
just that I'm just happy that the main thing I was experiencing the whole time I was watching, it was like, hey, this is just a really good show.
Yeah,
I was just pleased the entire way that there was no hiccups, there was no little things that made me think, this is a low rent show. It's a real big show that hits on all the cylinders that it's trying to hit on, especially if you love Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just continuing to stay right in that level, and I was just excited and happy and pleased the whole way through.
Yeah, I feel like episode 3 is a great example of how this show operates on level with, any mainstream show in terms of, they're paying off different things, they're setting up different mysteries, they're doing just things really well and very expertly from the craft perspective with writing. We're not going to get super in depth into all those details and do a analysis of kind of writing craft and things like that, but you could they're doing a great job of thinking through how to kind of tie together different storylines. I really appreciate just what John Irwin and John Gunn have been doing with House of David. And if you have not checked this out yet, you can get a 7-day free trial subscription to the Wonder Project subscription on Prime, so you can then get the House of David first couple episodes and see what it's all like and see if it's worth kind of continuing. So I would definitely encourage that. But yeah, let's dive into episode 3. So for kind of the title on this one, I have David's True Enemy, because I feel like we're starting to get little subtle hints that Eshbaal is really much more of a foe than we think. Although this episode, it does an interesting thing of laying out all these kind of breadcrumbs to make us suspicious of him, but then at the same time, they give him several moments to be very sympathetic, especially the way that he interacts with the girl and cares for her and kind of champions her. So I think they're actually doing something really interesting and kind of complex with his character. So I enjoyed that in episode 3, and I'm looking forward to kind of discussing what they're doing. So one of my first questions.
We're going to be going full spoilers for everyone out there.
Yes, that is a good qualification. So if you've not watched episode 3, this is not one of my no spoiler reviews. This is a full in-depth discussion of the different events that are happening. And so be warned, we are jumping into spoilers right now, because episode 3 opens with a flashback that gives us a little bit of Eshbaal's experience after he was kidnapped in episode 4 of season 1 last year, because he kind of gets taken off the map in the middle of season 1, and then we don't really know what's going on. And then he showed up at the end in episode 8 and kind of had his strange appearance. Everybody's kind of wondering where's he been? What's he doing? Why does he seem to have changed? And we start to get a few answers here in episode 3, although a lot is still kind of mysterious as far as like why his kind of whole philosophy has changed and who exactly is kind of behind all this. But we do get some hints, and I want to point to a few things related to that. So in the opening scene of episode 3, we see Eshbaal. He gets brought up to this kind of high mountain palace or fortress or whatever, and he's brought in to see this rich ruler kind of person. And we aren't told who this man is, but he has the statue in the background, and this is interesting in a few different ways. First of all, it is pretty clearly, I think, some sort of idol, some sort of a false god. Eshbaal recognizes this. At one point, he gets mad at the guy, is like, I'm not going to make a deal with you and your gods or whatever. So he clearly recognizes that whoever this guy is some sort of pagan. We don't know which god specifically he's worshiping, but he is not a faithful Israelite by any means. That's kind of reinforced. So this is cool. I took this image and I put it into Gemini, and I was like, what's the language that's there at the bottom of the statue? And it was able to recognize it as Akkadian, which is a very prominent language at the time, which was used by a lot of the peoples, the pagan neighbors of Israel. So it could be like Canaanites, it could be potentially like Ammonites, maybe even Babylonians or something like that. So it's one of kind of Israel's pagan neighbors, most likely. So here's kind of my theory as far as who this guy is. So over the course of the episode, the guy brings Eshbaal in, and he kind of is a little nice. It's a little bit like good cop, bad cop. But the guy himself is really nice to Eshbaal, but then he sends him off with this guard who tortures him, whips him, beats him up, and whatever. And then the guy brings him back in. The old guy is nice to him again, and eventually it appears that Eshbaal kind of breaks, but then at the same time, Eshbaal grabs a knife and holds it up to him and is like, "I'm loyal to the house of my father Saul." And so, and that all this time, the guy is like telling Eshbaal the story about how you train elephants by kind of tying them to a post when they're young, and then they learn to be restrained even when they're older. And he's like, "This is what's happened to you by your father, and I'm kind of breaking you free or whatever," which is kind of a funny thing to say while you're torturing someone, that you're breaking them free or whatever. But my theory is that this older guy is, yeah, some sort of like pagan king, and that basically the Eshbaal story is like the pagans are wanting to kind of influence the Israelites, and so Eshbaal will kind of represent, because if you look later on, this doesn't really show up explicitly in the book of Samuel, like pagan idolatry, because David appears to have been fairly faithful, and we don't have it other than like Saul kind of dabbling with the Witch of Endor. We don't get any kind of explicit mentions of paganism with Saul. But as you look later on among the kings of Israel and Judah, eventually when they split, there's a lot of kind of pagan syncretism that happens where different kind of pagan nations are trying to get Israel to worship their gods as well, and that's kind of a major theme throughout the rest of the time of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And so my guess is that the show is kind of bringing that theme forward, which it does a lot of other stuff as well. And it's using Eshbaal to show kind of one of these kind of syncretistic Israelites. So he's going to be kind of someone who is championing bringing in other gods in addition to Yahweh. And that is kind of what the whole scheme is, that they're kind of putting him in there so that he can corrupt the worship of Israel. That's my theory. Just talked a lot, but I'm curious, Victor, what you think, or if you have other ideas, definitely go at it.
I mean, no, I agree. That sounds exactly like what it is. Because what weren't there like 4 or 5 kings that they mentioned? The Philistine kings, isn't he one of them? That's kind of what I assumed. He was just one of the group. But did we meet all of them, or is this one?
So it's in theory, it's possible that he's a Philistine king, although like later on when so this guy he sends some assassins to try to kill Jonathan and stuff like that, and the Israelites they seem to think that these are not Philistines when they're kind of
That is
discussing it
true.
afterward.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't really tell because everybody's like cloaked up and stuff, and so in theory, it could be one of the Philistine kings. That's who I assumed it was back in season one. But I'm thinking more that they're trying to add a additional wrinkle because
Right.
after David becomes king, there's going to be all these battles with some of the surrounding nations. And so I'm thinking that they're kind of anticipating that because they do a lot of anticipating stuff that's
Right.
happening, on
Yeah,
the pike.
especially since
So,
they're clearly making Akish the head Philistine.
yes.
It doesn't sound like he's necessarily beholden to anybody else. So I would agree. Probably he's like whoever this guy is like another external source of antagonism.
Yeah. And actually, as you're saying that, they may even use this to bring in another kind of big theme in the rest of the stories of the kings, which is one of the reasons why the Israelites would adopt some of the pagan gods of their surrounding neighbors is in order to get kind of alliances with them against whoever the kind of most terrifying opponent was at the time. And so maybe Eshbaal's whole idea is that, oh yeah, I'll bring in some of these other gods and I'll kind of solidify our alliance with whatever this kingdom is. Maybe it's Tyre, maybe it's the Ammonites, so that we can kind of fight together against the Philistines. And so then it kind of makes sense that they're painting Eshbal not as just kind of this totally wicked schemer or whatever, but as someone who maybe thinks that he is doing what's best for the nation. Like I'm doing the pragmatic thing by making this type of alliance. Yeah, and Eshbal's name, Eshbal, might point me in the direction of thinking that these could be people who worship Baal. It would be kind of ironic because he's already named Eshbal by his father, but maybe that's why the guy thought that this was his fate because it was already in his name or whatever. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. That's my guess is that we're gonna kind of be exploring some of those dynamics
Yeah,
with
I agree. It's
Eshbal.
like I think our two sides are pragmatism
Hmm.
and faith, and you're going to see there's positive and negative being pragmatic about stuff, and I think we're going to
Yeah.
see all the different shades of it because you see that with like all the daughters being used as bargaining chips, and
Hmm.
everything that Saul and his family do, they're doing it thinking it's part of some kind of 4D chess. Where
Yep.
David is just like, I'm just going to do what the Lord tells me to do, and kind of you're going to see. I think we're just going to see how doing the other side, the pragmatic side, is just going to lead to endless chaos. Even that'll even be the problem for David too. Eventually,
Hmm.
is that he tries to do something pragmatic and it just leads to disaster for him.
Yeah, like when David is marrying other women and stuff like that, what a lot of people don't realize is that David's probably not primarily after like more sex when he's taking on multiple wives. I mean, that could be in there as well, but primarily when he's taking on different wives, it's so he can build alliances with different tribes or even with different kingdoms, which that's what you did back at the time. Even though some people think like, oh, it doesn't explicitly say in the Old Testament that you can have multiple wives, but it actually does with kings. It says that they are not supposed to have multiple wives. And so when David is doing that, he is kind of going against God's vision for the kingship, which was you don't try to build more power by being practical, by trying to do these different alliances with different nations and different tribes in order to get earthly power. You trust in God's power, and that's going to be enough for you. And so that's really what David should be doing. And up until this point, David has been a pretty good kind of avatar of that kind of pure sense of faith. In the face of Goliath, the one of the imminent threats for this season is going to be the technological stuff that we talked about with episodes 1 and 2 and the sword of Goliath. The Philistines are, trying to develop more iron weapons that will put them on a better vantage point against the Israelites. And so it may be that kind of Eshbal is going to come in and say, well, the Philistines, they've got all this technology. And so, you need to think about like, how are we going to face off against that? And so it may be instead of trying to get more technology to face against the Philistines, they try to get more allies or something like that. So I'm interested to kind of see
Mhm.
where they go with that. And yeah, it's definitely a very biblical theme. The idea that you have different people within the royal family. Some of them who are true worshipers of Yahweh. Some of them are kind of intermingling other beliefs out of this kind of pragmatic concern to face off against Israel's enemies. This is all over the Old Testament and Book of Kings. So I like to see them kind of working that back into the story of Saul's house.
I think Eshbaal though is just he's the true bad guy here.
Yeah.
The thumbnail posted. I think we're being fooled because the actor is a good enough actor to make us believe that he is sincere about a lot of the stuff that we're supposed to believe he's sincere about.
Mm.
Fool us. Especially, and I know we'll probably get to it at the end, but it's like, I think he was 100% helping set up all of that ambush and everything else. So he's
Mhm.
completely conflicted and corrupted and bought and sold by, whatever a deal he's made.
Mm.
Everything else is just kind of like subterfuge to mask that, I believe. Yeah, I
He
don't know if
has
he
them.
planned it, but he was 100% knew it was going to happen because he had that one assassin guy just kind of looked at him and then just turned and walked away like, hey, we're good here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well,
He,
definitely the assassins are, they're doing it on behalf of him. They want to kill Jonathan. They're all about killing Jonathan in that moment. And it's because they want to knock Jonathan out of the line of succession. And so then Eshbaal would be next in line and they would have their man on the throne. So that definitely points to the sense that whoever it is, they're definitely trying to put Eshbaal on the throne so that when he takes over, he can do something. And the idea that he would bring in some sort of foreign worship,
yeah,
foreign gods would definitely kind of seem to fit with what we. Yes,
he
yes,
is,
yes.
he is in that full manipulation, callous intrigue, deals, subterfuge, all of that. That's his
Yeah,
storyline.
yeah. I like how last episode and this episode, he's had several moments where it comes across as if he is being nice. Like with Mirab last episode, where she was kind of expressing like a lack of self worth, and so oh, it seemed like he was just kind of trying to build her up and be like, oh, you need to value yourself and ask for what you want or whatever, which in some contexts you could see as being a completely like innocent and even encouraging thing for someone to say to someone who is struggling with self-worth or whatever. But he clearly has like a larger kind of scheme or a larger purpose in mind. We get the sense that yeah, he is kind of trying to stir the pot within his house. He may, he even kind of put together that he needs to try to make tension between the sisters in order to cause problems for David because David could be a
Mhm.
potential rival. And then even like with Jonathan, when he went and visited Jonathan at the healer's house last episode, like that was kind of a weird kind of moment. And when he was like trying to get Jonathan to bring the healer back to the house, and then we find out that he's been like sending her presents and trying to get her here. So I feel like he's doing like all these things that seem very nice, but he might have ulterior motives behind them, even if it's kind of hard at this point to see what exactly he's trying to achieve.
Or yeah, agree to whatever deal that they wanted to make with him.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely like kind of cinema code for like we've been showing you the real thing up until this point, and then when we have to cut away and have someone actually describe it, the
Mhm.
rest of the stuff that they're describing is probably BS. He's probably making that stuff up. We've seen the part that's real, but we know that because of we've seen kind of a fuller picture of that part, we get the sense that the rest of the stuff that he's saying is probably not as accurate. And Saul, for his part, seemed to be a little suspicious of Eshbaal, and so he probably doesn't know what Eshbaal's plans are. But I think he's canny enough to realize like Eshbaal's not a totally kind of trustworthy player.
Mhm.
Although I also think that yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking more about episode 2 and the opening narration from Mychal, where she was like, my father's house was killed from within by the one he trusted, the one I loved, which the kind of surface level reading is that she's talking about David, but it could be that that's a misdirect and it's actually Eshbaal that she's talking
Yeah,
about.
I like that.
At least like the possibility that there's kind of different layers of meaning or that possibility is out there. And so love kind of how the show is kind of setting up that intrigue. Yeah, like at the end of last season, I was kind of unsure of what I thought about the whole Eshbal plot, but I'm definitely much more interested. And I like that even though they haven't kind of told us like everything about what's going on, they've given us like more to run on. So we have more of a sense of like okay, like he's probably angling for the throne. There's whoever these power brokers are, they're, they're trying to knock off Jonathan. Like we have more of a sense of what his plans are and stuff like
Mm.
that. So I like when, it's okay if they like keep some secrets or whatever, but they need to give us at least enough to start to put together a narrative. I feel like they've given us that in episode 3. Yeah. Any more with Eshbal? I'm curious, what do you think? So a lot of the stuff, like I can imagine, like how he's maybe using these things to try to like kind of sow chaos or do different things like that. What do you think though with his relationship with Dinah, the daughter of the elder of Dan? Like, do you think there's anything genuine there in what happens with them towards the end, or do you think he's also kind of totally manipulating
I
her?
think he's totally manipulating because he didn't even remember her. He had to have her be reintroduced to him because I guess he was drunk whenever he seduced her and passed out before he actually seduced her.
Yep.
So it's. I think she's totally a piece on the chessboard. Probably the plan was for her father to be killed all
Yep.
along, and then she would need to join with him so that he could produce an heir that was loyal to him, so he could
Mhm.
have his own branch of the family.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, although like it's weird that she has already told him like up front, like I'm not gonna give you an heir, like I'm not gonna have your kid or whatever. She's kind of a weird choice in that respect because if you are kind of wanting to change regimes or whatever and put F-ball on the throne, then at the time like having an heir is like a really important thing, and so you would think that that would kind of change up his calculations, but maybe he just thinks that like if I kind of continue to smooth talker like and plus this is not a modern setting where you can exactly do a whole lot of family planning, like things happen,
Right.
so I don't know, like maybe he's just not worried about it, although the show is kind of setting up there when Eshbal does finally get on the throne in Second Samuel. One of the things that's noted is that he yeah, I think he actually, does he have sons? No, I don't know, there's something about his heirs. So I think they're maybe kind of like setting some stuff up there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested.
Yeah,
I think,
I didn't think that it's. He went in with a plan. He was gonna, make this offer to this person that he had ruined, and that she was and or her father were going to jump at the plan, and it didn't go like that. But he still had to go through with it because I mean that was what he told
yeah,
everybody. This is what I'm going to do, and he doesn't have a backup at the moment. I don't know.
that's
Doesn't
true.
sound like
True.
there's another sister that he could be going with. So he's like he's got to make this one work somehow.
Well, and Dan, we've found out that right now they are like one of the richest tribes or whatever that was established. And also in some ways, like what he's like really after is to kind of establish a certain kind of image for himself within the court. Like he's trying to revise his image from being like the dissolute, drunk kid who, everybody kind of looked down on to seeming much more respectable. And that was kind of what this was all about, is kind of in some ways kind of regaining his honor, especially in his father's eyes. And so in some ways that may be like the ultimate goal, is like showing his dad like that, he's a honorable person, even though he's not actually doing it for honorable reasons. Yeah. So, whether she wants to have a kid or any of that, like he's really just trying to do what he thinks will kind of reflect well on him in the long run. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts kind of on yeah, that whole kind of plot line of them kind of going to the tribe of Dan, making the deal? We'll get into talking about kind of David's role and deal making and stuff like that. Anything else there?
I'm good on that. That's I think you kind of covered it.
Yeah. One little note that I wanted to make here. Yeah, Ahinoam, especially in season 1, she had kind of all these different plots going where she was doing different things behind Saul's back. And episode 3, like few of those things kind of come home to roost. So, she gets exposed for having crowned Eshbal when Saul hadn't died yet, but she said, "Oh, I thought you were going to die." And initially, Saul's like, "It's fine, but don't lie to me ever again." Like, very menacing. And then not much later, he finds out. So Ahinoam is kind of a jerk to the female servant or whatever was, to be fair, kind of looking at her jewels and stuff like that. The female servant rats on Ahinoam that she um, took Saul's signet ring and changed the laws while he was gone in order to enable the witch Besai to be around. And that was like kind of episode 5, I think, or episode 6. Ahinoam, she's kind of done all these shady things, and Saul, he finds it out, especially when he finds out a second thing, he's like really mad at her. He forbids her from going to the tabernacle, which is probably going to come up. They're probably going to be going to the tabernacle pretty soon. They keep mentioning that. Anyway, I think a lot of this is providing background to a comment that Saul makes to Jonathan. I think this is like when he's like mad at Jonathan for siding with David, and he's like, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman! Don't you know that I know that you've been siding with the son of Jesse to your shame or whatever." And it's this very like kind of random comment, and if you look at commentaries, a lot of them will be like, "Yeah, this is really like strong language, and it's very insulting and offensive or whatever." And so I think that the show, the writers of the show, they are very well read in terms of the Book of Samuel. They're looking for all these little details that they can provide a backstory to, or that they can draw on for inspiration. And so my thought is that a lot of Ahinoam's storyline is to explain like why Saul so uh, apparently so mad at his wife that he calls her a perverse, rebellious woman. I mean, he's basically calling his son like a son of a bee, or a bastard or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to kind of clock that.
Good point.
Yeah, and then yeah, the
That was rough.
to Eshbaal, the other kind of major storyline of the episode is Mychal and Mirab. So if you recall, episode 2 ended with this bombshell where Saul's like, "Oh, David, I want to offer you my daughter," but instead of offering Mychal, he offers Mirab, and so we get kind of the fallout of that. And initially, I liked that they did this. Mychal doesn't suspect Mirab at all. She just assumes that it's her dad, kind of being a little crazy or being a little controlling or whatever. And so she's like, "Why would he do this?" And she goes to David. She even goes to Mirab. I love that moment where she's like complaining to Mirab, and he's like, "Why would father do this to me?" And Mirab's like, "I don't know. Maybe he just thinks that it'll make David too soft." And she's like, and then when Mychal is like, "Oh, well, maybe if you go with me to father, then you can change his mind." And Mirab's like, "No, no, 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 he won't do that." So yeah, I liked how they played that. And then yeah, it all builds up to when Saul finally lets the cat out of the bag to
I
Mychal.
was surprised that they
Listen,
were going to let that out that quickly. I thought
yeah,
they were going to drag that out.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I get it. Like they probably don't want to
Yeah, I was
take
very
too
glad.
long to move things along. Yeah, and then I liked like Mychal like being just like slightly childish, like pouring all the wine into her own cup instead of letting Mirab have any and stuff like that. Yeah, what do you think of all the drama going on?
I mean, I thought it played out logically, beautifully. I mean, it was a great setup. Especially, I mean, it was like, I was kind of surprised that they were able to find some nuance in how
Yeah.
they presented, especially how David was having to deal with how
Mm,
to do that. I was like, how are they gonna handle that? We kind of know he ends up with Mikhail eventually, but how do they get there? We kind of see a couple of things in him, but or just that scene where whenever McCall finds out and then just storms into Mirab's room and just just smacks her. It was she had it coming. That was
yep. And
a pretty intense scene.
yeah, yep. And she's gonna get more than her due in terms of punishment eventually. But yeah, and like you said, I like how David is kind of forced into this awkward situation where at first he thinks like, oh, I can just talk to Saul and clear this up, and then Saul is like really angry at David's thought that he could challenge Saul's will in the matter, which is very kind of true to if you were offered the daughter of the king by your lord, you definitely would not be in the position to just like ask for the other daughter instead. I totally believe that for Saul, that he would be angered at David's presumption in that situation. And then I like how David, even Mirab starting to like kind of come onto him a little bit and be like, "Oh, when you get back, we're gonna make all the arrangements and stuff." And David kind of just like plays like he's like respectful but like cold a little bit, and like um oh, I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's basically like, yeah, I'll see you when I return or something. Yeah, so I love kind of how they handle some of the complicated dynamics there. Yeah, I just they've been building this up for a while, but yeah, I thought they delivered pretty well on it. So
It was great how they really did show how all of these people, they're all people that, they want to find love, they want to find happiness, but you know, all of them, even Saul, they're all locked into this structure where they have to
mm,
do these things that they don't want to do. There's
yes,
the patriarchal society in general, but then there's the more of the royal side of it that's even more restrictive and more than probably even regular society was.
yeah,
And they're all just kind of trapped in it and trying to, and you can see that with like Mirab and Mychal, where they, Mychal's not happy with her. She knows that that's just how this is. There's nothing I can do about
mhm.
it. That's just how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I feel like it does a really good job. Like the show is kind of helping us get into this mindset of a very foreign culture and time where marriage works in a way that's foreign to how we think. So most of us, we live in societies where the individual makes their own decision for marriage, and it's, about love and about commitment and all these high-minded things. And so the show has to kind of like work us through like they do give us kind of, the romance between David and Mychal, which seems more like something that's familiar to us. But then they have all these different kind of dynamics in the court happening to help us see how marriage actually operated in the ancient world, how, kings, use their daughters as tools for diplomacy and for power and different things like that, and how the daughters themselves would have had to deal with these kinds of dynamics. Yeah, so I think it's doing a great job of helping people kind of see themselves back into this world.
It's funny we say the ancient world. It's really, I don't know, 60 years ago.
Yeah, that's
Kind of all that changed. It was like 60 years ago, people would have been like, "Oh, I get it totally. I don't need to have any kind of an explanation for how all the dynamics work."
yeah, no, that's a really good point. And in certain parts of the world, it's still that way or closer to that way. Yeah, definitely. The whole like David, Mychal, Mirab story. There's also like little hints of so when Mychal comes into David after hearing the news, David is reading his Bible, great Bible student, and he's reading through the book of Genesis, the story of Joseph, Genesis 50. He quotes the famous line, Joseph is talking about his brothers, and they're afraid that Joseph, now that he has power, that he's going to punish them for all the bad stuff they did to him while they had power over him. And he says, you meant all these things for evil, but God meant it for good, so that he could save many. I'm sorry if I'm not getting the quotation perfectly, but David, he quotes that verse from scripture. So the show I think is definitely kind of planting that seed. At this point, we're not really seeing God's purpose as much. We're just seeing a lot of people meaning things for evil. Eshbaal meaning things for evil. We'll get to talking about Adriel. He definitely means some things for evil. Mirab, the people who tried to kill Jonathan. We're seeing a lot of different kind of schemes and people who are out to get David, out to get the house of Saul. And I think one thing that the show is setting up is that we're going to see all these different plots that people are doing to try to destroy David or destroy Saul or destroy the Israelites. They're actually going to be used by God for his purposes. And, they'll actually work out providentially a surprising way. So I like how the show is kind of seeding that idea here at an early stage, even though I think we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see how these things actually work out for good. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
Now I think you covered that one pretty good.
we already talked about this a little bit. I liked Abner in the scene where David comes in and he's like totally does not know how to handle Saul at this point. He's like, trying to talk from the heart and be honest. And Abner's like, no, 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 you don't want to. And David
Yeah.
like keeps going, and then Saul gets like really mad at David, and then Abner takes David aside and is like, the king's gratitude is a cup you can joke on. Basically, being like, you know, don't like don't take this gift that the king has given you and then like turn it into something that is actually like bad for you. So I like that whole setup to the scene. I like how the show is starting to position like a little bit of tension between David and Saul, while still having like a fairly, Saul's not like suspecting David at this point, although he's about to, so we'll find out. But so far, Saul is like respectful of David in terms of David's like character and stuff like that. But we're seeing kind of Saul's, his arrogance, the sense that his will rules, which is, part of what got him into trouble with God, thinking that, as the king, that means that his choices are the only thing that matter. And so I like that, David's starting to see like a darker side of Saul. And Saul, he's not necessarily suspecting David, but he's just kind of treating him like one of his subjects, and just expecting him to conform and getting frustrated if David is not getting with the program.
Yeah, he's a piece on the chessboard that
Yeah.
is not doing what he's expecting it to do.
Yeah. Saul is thinking very much like average Near Eastern ancient kings. He's not thinking, through this kind of greater theological perspective, although, at times like he's like, oh yeah, we do have to respect the law of Moses or whatever, but he's thinking, very pragmatically, and he's feeling like, people are just his tools. So I like how they are kind of painting one picture of kingship, which will then kind of provide a contrast for David when he eventually comes to the throne. And even before then, I think we'll see David as he's kind of leading his band of outlaws. We'll see him kind of dealing with them in a very different way.
Yeah, Saul's never had to deal with a hero in his ranks. He's always been the hero of his people. He just has never encountered anyone that could be a true rival to him or
Yeah,
a threat.
because like the only other person is like his son Jonathan or whatever, and Jonathan is his son, so he kind of has extra authority in that relationship. And you don't get the sense that Jonathan he'll speak up a little bit. Like I like how he was mad that Saul had been keeping Samuel in prison or whatever. But even Jonathan will kind of show a little bit of deference to his father, and so yeah, I agree with you. They're kind of showing how Saul's not used to having kind of this hero who isn't kind of fully on board with his program or totally in deference to him.
Yeah, and we see David's naivete a little bit too. He kind of weans himself from that over the course of this episode too.
Yeah. So we also get a lot of time with David and Jonathan. We get a little training montage, opposite
It's
of
great.
the training montage of Akish back in Gath, and we see David and Jonathan. Jonathan showing in some different things with like footwork and stuff like that. But then kind of beyond that, when the whole plot with sending Eshbaal to get a wife from the tribe of Dan really kicks into gear, then I like how Saul's like, oh, this is another part of your training. It's important for you to learn how to be a man of war and fight with the sword and stuff like that. But it's also important for you to learn how to do negotiation, things like that. And so we're seeing kind of a different aspect of David's formation. He doesn't just need to learn how to fight, but he also needs to learn how to make peace or make deals between different opposing figures and stuff like that. And the show actually depicts David as being like a real natural at this as well, even better than kind of the approach of Saul through Jonathan is to kind of try to put like maximum pressure. Like you didn't show up at the hour of need, and so we could really like punish you for doing that. So you better like get behind, let Eshbaal do his thing, and this is going with the law of Moses. Like it's more like trying to pressure, intimidate. It's kind of seeing negotiation as this thing where the one with more power leans on the person with less power until they kind of submit to them. Whereas, the the leader of Dan, Yahir, I think, he's like, no, you disrespected me, and I'm never gonna, take the offer of this uh, dissolute jerk son that you've sent to me. Like, no way, like, go back. I'm not gonna listen to you or whatever. And then David comes in and he's able to kind of mediate between those two different points of view, which are very both like kind of zero sum sorts of perspectives. And David is able to help Yahir, the father of Dinah, see that you know King Saul is just gonna cause problems for him in the long run. And by like accepting the offer, he can kind of demonstrate his strength and his kind of magnanimity. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think of that whole situation?
I mean, to me, this is like what the strength of a show like this can do, or the fact that this is
Hmm.
a TV show and not a movie, is that
Yeah.
we get this very important sequence of events for David. And you
Yep.
get to see him because, like, usually it's like, we go from he slays Goliath, and then we make it a little bit with Saul, and then he's King David in a movie or whatever. It's like it just kind of it has to jump over all that stuff, and I just really appreciated how we were able to see him having to learn how to negotiate, and the fact that he doesn't he acknowledges that he's supposed to be this commander and has no idea how to be a commander.
Yeah.
He's
Yep.
he doesn't just he's not like a Mary Sue kind of character
Yeah.
that suddenly he's just able to be this leader of men and inspiring people. So I love that we are getting to see that progression and how that's going to change him and affect him and what it takes to get him there.
Yeah, and it also helps like build up like why Jonathan is going to have this like deep loyalty and trust in David, where even when Jonathan's father turns against him, Jonathan's gonna be willing to stick with him. Part of that is because Jonathan knows that this is, Yahweh's chosen one, and so they've established Jonathan as a true believer and a obedient Israelite. But part of it is also like we're seeing him see David do things that are heroic, not just on the battlefield, but in the negotiations. He's seeing David act like a better king than his father, because we
Mhm.
know that if Saul was there on scene, Saul would have like made things worse instead of making them better. And so Jonathan is seeing some real potential in David in kind of the fullness of the scope of what a king should be. So I like how the show is kind of building David's relationship with Jonathan in that regard, and also kind of helping us start to appreciate the potential in David beyond just
Mhm.
making him a great action hero and a great lover or whatever, but also making him like a
Right.
great kind of deal maker. Uh,
Trust each other and have to trust each other
yeah.
when it seems like everything's going to go against them. So it's going to be, it's just, they're really doing a great job with it.
Yeah. And, I'll give him props. Like, I think it was like a little risky to do an entire plot of an episode where it kind of feels like a little expendable in terms of like, there's no like imminent threat from the Philistines or whatever. There's no, like sharp deadline where things are going to go bad if, David doesn't get this one thing or whatever. But I appreciate that they've taken the time to show David in a different sort of element and yeah, to just kind of build up
Mhm.
his character. Yeah, build up his relationship with Jonathan, like you said.
I think a good reason why this is working is just across the board, the acting has been stellar so far.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is like top tier, top level. I can't imagine any actors doing a better job than what these guys are doing.
yeah, yeah. The Jonathan's actor Kai and Michael Iskander. I definitely feel like you know when we discuss kind of the first few episodes of season one of House of David, I feel like the first couple episodes, I had some kind of critiques of like how slowly they kind of brought challenges for David and stuff like that. But I feel like that the actors have been good throughout, and it's great to see them. Like I feel like the writing is really kind of hitting stride here in season two, and so it's great to see kind of everything kind of on full cylinder, getting going and stuff like that.
Yep.
Just a little thing here. We
Hmm.
we get our first
All right.
introduction of Uriah the Hittite. I don't actually know if he's one of the people here. I didn't have an image on hand. So yeah, he's one of the men that David trains with. There's another guy that they also set up named Uzzah. For a second, I thought it was Uzzah, who's the guy who reaches out and steadies the ark when David's like bringing it to Jerusalem, and then he gets struck down by because he touched the ark when he's not supposed to. But it's not spelled the same, and it's not said exactly the same. So I'm not thinking it's probably not Uzzah. It's probably just like some other member of the
I,
mighty men.
I sent the,
Feeling that they have for it, and there's no one, at least in the translation that I was searching, that has the name. So like I'm wondering, it could still be Uzzah. Although I think Uzzah's like a from the priestly line and not necessarily a warrior, but I don't know. They could get over that or get around it. That would be the only person that I can really.
yeah, I just assumed it was going to be one of the other mighty men or something.
Yeah.
I just didn't remember the name of.
Yeah. Anyway, so he doesn't do a whole lot. Like he just kind of like is like, hey, I'm Uriah, and they train a little bit. But I like that they are introducing him early, not only so that like we can kind of become attached to him, so that eventually when David kills him off, it'll be really impactful, but also so that we have that kind of hanging over our heads, like the informed viewer who knows that David is eventually going to
Mhm.
kill Uriah, which I think is probably most people who are going to watch this. They'll just kind of constantly be thinking about that throughout this. So it adds kind of an extra layer to our experience because right now David is doing all the right things as far as you can see. The show is kind of adding little bits of foreshadowing to remind us, like, David, he's not going to be on the right track forever. And it makes a lot of sense for them to introduce Uriah at this point because basically what David is going to do to Uriah, Saul is about to do to David, right? So Saul sends David out to do like an impossible task that he thinks will get David killed. That's probably going to happen next episode, I'm guessing. And so that's exactly what David does to Uriah. He sends him into like a impossible situation, and Uriah actually does get killed as a result of it. So cool, kind of little foreshadowing for them to
Yeah,
insert.
I wouldn't be surprised if Uriah is on that trip with David. Do it twice,
I think you're right. Especially like they don't have any other mighty men to go with him at this point. So
right? And Uriah was said that picked such a nice actor. You're gonna
yeah,
feel really bad. It's like, oh, I like
I
the
will
guy
say,
already. Oh, it's gonna be terrible.
I will say, I do think that our like kind of setup for Uriah in David and the Outlaws is a little bit cooler than what they're
A
doing.
little more nuanced.
He's
Yeah.
just like kind of already one of the Israelite soldiers, and he's just like part of David's band. So for those of you who have not like watched our other stuff, David and the Outlaws is a hypothetical show that we kind of sketched out last year before House of David came out. It's not kind of an exact parallel to House of David because it's not focused on David as the main character. Just like The Chosen is focused more on kind of the disciples of Jesus and kind of follows them as they are following Jesus. David and the Outlaws follows some of David's mighty men as they join David's band of outlaws while he's on the run from King Saul. And one of our main characters in the show is secretly Uriah. You don't know at first that he's Uriah. He's just called Hittite. And initially, he actually has a different name, and then he's going to change the name. Anyway, so Uriah early on in the show is actually not on David's side. He's a kind of like a bounty hunter or a mercenary that is hired to try to track down David and the mighty men. But then, like over the course of the show, as he sees them, he's impressed. And by the end of the first season, he converts and joins David's band. So, I thought that we had like kind of a cooler like setup that really made kind of his relationship to
Mhm.
David even more like interesting. I get that they don't have time to do all that we had in our show, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
That this because I liked what we did. I thought we came up with a really cool idea, but I appreciate that they're taking a completely different angle, and it is just as compelling and
Yeah.
just as much fun. It's like that's how really surprised at how rich the story material is to
Mm.
take to do so many things with it that I didn't before we started doing our little project, which was a few months before we even found out that there was going to be House of David. That there was that much in there for when we did it, and that there's just so much more material that is fertile ground. Is this is a very fantastic story. It's an epic story
Yeah.
that I'm excited is getting that epic treatment.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not like throwing that in there to take down what they've done. Like so far, Uriah, he seems cool. Just throwing that in there to be like if you want to see other stuff, like there's different ways you could do his character because we hardly know anything about Uriah before he gets killed off by David. But yeah, I like what they're doing, and like you said, like this is just like great material that's like for an adaptation like this. I mean, House of David is really hitting it out of the parks. Yeah, I'm glad that they're doing what they're doing. Last, I think this, or no, one other thing after this. End of the episode, Adriel shows up and he reveals to Saul that he knows who Samuel anointed when he was in Judah. And so basically, this is setting up. Adriel's going to expose David to Saul. It's possible that this is like a misdirect again, but
I think that's
we know that Saul is eventually going to marry Mirab, not to David, but instead, at least biblically, to Adriel. It's possible they change that to Adriel's son Jordan, but I think that they're going to give Mirab her, comeuppance for all the bad behavior she's been up to. And so she's going to get married off to the creepy old man. And that'll be his reward that he gets for exposing who who Samuel anointed, and who the snake is within Saul's house or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I like that they're kind of building that tension. So most likely, what we're going to see in the next episode, when Saul finds out, initially maybe he's going to want to just like go and kill David, but I think Ahinoam will kind of help kind of shape him and be like, no, 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 we need to do this like craftily because, people love David. He's become very popular. And so you can't just go kill him. You have to go send him out and make him do something that will get him killed, which is, you know, like we said earlier, exactly what David ends up doing
Mhm.
to Uriah. So then Saul's going to be like, okay, I got an idea. I know that David, he wasn't really down on Mirab, but he'll probably really do something crazy if I offer him the chance to marry Mychal instead. And so, hey, David, come here, you know, do this impossible task for me, which, as we discussed in one of our earlier live streams, is going to be Saul sending him off to kill 100 Philistines and cut off their foreskins. So, yeah, I don't know. Looking forward
Yeah, I
to.
mean,
Go ahead.
yeah, I don't think there's any way that he could just kill David. He's got to like do something sneaky, just because
Yep.
David is the giant slayer, and and it's the worst that you could say about him is that he's God's new anointed. That's not going to go over well
Yep.
if you're killing. Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. It's like, did Adriel specifically know that it was David that was anointed, or was someone from that Samuel went to the house of Jesse? Did he get details that?
That's a good point.
So that
Technically, he
could
doesn't
stretch that
know.
enough a little bit.
It could stretch it out a little bit longer and make it. I mean, I guess he could suspect that it's Eliab instead of David. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That would because it would be a little early in the season for him. I don't know though. Like, I feel like David has gotten to a decent point of like recognition. There might be like a little back and forth where he's not sure, but yeah, I feel like he'll figure it out like pretty soon. That
Yeah, the show does seem to be not afraid to speed things along, which I appreciate.
yeah, yeah, I think so. Because like if like next episode he finds out and then he sends David on the impossible task, then like probably next episode David has to get married to Nicole, and there has to be like a little bit of time where they're married, and Saul is like stewing, and then maybe that episode ends with Saul trying to throw the spear at David. So that would be episode 5, and then that would give like kind of 3 episodes for David to be on the run, which would probably be about as much as they want to do for this season. I don't know. That would be my guess because yeah, I don't know. They're gonna have to fit in. They're gonna want to do like they keep setting up like a visit to the tabernacle at Nob, which I think is going to happen earlier in the season, and then Saul will come back. Like I think the slaughter at Nob, I think, is going to be episode 8, and yeah, we'll get some moments of like David. We've seen in the trailer David gathering his men with his sword of Goliath. So that's going to be like probably very end of the season, I would guess. Yeah. Anyway,
Probably.
we'll see how things play out, but definitely we're starting to move from kind of David's honeymoon period with Saul to Saul starting to suspect and want to murder David in different ways. One other little bit of kind of biblical foreshadowing that I thought was cool. So there's Ahinoam, she's had this witch around to kind of help do some stuff for Saul. And then in this episode, Ahinoam dismisses Besai the witch because she's like, Saul, he's found out stuff and it's no longer going to be safe for you here. So you better get out of Dodge. Thanks for your friendship. And then we see that Abner and Joab kind of both notice that conversation. And then towards the end of the episode, Abner kind of confronts the witch. And the show has established that Abner has kind of this genealogical connection, that his mother was a witch of some sort, and that they're kind of that was kind of part of the darkness that he was brought out of when he joins the House of Saul. So he ends up like, he kind of threatens her, but he ends up letting her go. But then, like, just a little bit after she runs off from him, Joab comes and he stabs her because he's a little more cutthroat than Abner. And that whole sequence is kind of setting up a big part of kind of Joab's character is that he is like he's just ready to kill people, and to do it in kind of underhanded ways. Eventually, Joab is actually going to kill Abner himself after David kind of ascends to the throne of Judah, but Eshbaal is still on the throne of the rest of Israel, and Abner is kind of his general. There's this moment where Abner eventually kind of gives up on Eshbaal and wants to go over to David's side, and he comes and he kind of negotiates with David, and then he's heading home, and Joab is like hates Abner, and so he goes and he like it's like, hey, Abner, David had another message for you, and then he like goes and he murders murders Abner and covers it up for and whatever. And then there's another murder that Joab does. I'm forgetting right now who it is. So basically, like Joab's like real like a kind of underhanded guy who he's like loyal to David in some ways, but he does like some very shady stuff that he thinks that like David's like too pure and clean to do the real nasty stuff, and so I'm gonna do it for him. And so they're already kind of establishing that Joab is kind of this cutthroat guy, and they're also kind of establishing the tension between him and Abner. So I like how they started to introduce some of those things in different ways where if you have read the biblical story, you can start to be like, oh yeah, they're setting up that story. Yeah, so that was a fun bit. It was kind of a surprise because Saul, he goes and meets with a witch at Endor just before his death, the kind of the end of Saul's story. And so I've been assuming this entire time that the witch that we've been following was that witch and that we were just going to come back and meet her later on. So it was kind of a surprise that they killed this girl off and he'll have to meet with some other witch at Endor, I guess. But yeah, that's thoughts on that.
Yep. I don't know if you're gonna go into, but like Jonathan's romance with Sarah, I think her name
Oh yeah, yeah.
is
I didn't get into
progressing.
that too much. Yeah, do you have any thoughts?
No, it's just fun. I mean, it's like there's no biblical record of who he marries. He clearly marries somebody because he's got a son. But as
Yep.
far as who that is, so I don't know where they're going to go with this. If it's going to end poorly for Sarah at some point, but it's a nice little fun diversion in the middle of
Yeah,
town.
yeah, I would agree with that. I didn't put it on here just because I didn't necessarily have like a whole lot to say about it. In part because it is, like you said, just kind of something that they're inventing, which I think is eventually going to be a setup for Sarah will probably be the mother of Mephibosheth, who is the son of Jonathan that David ends up taking in. He's like crippled, and David shows him kindness, and it's a very famous and heartwarming story. And so far, Jonathan does not have a son, which at this time and place would be a big deal. Like people there'd be a whole lot more pressure on Jonathan to get married than there would be on
Right.
either of Saul's daughters, because that's like one of your main like duties as the heir to the king or whatever is to produce your own heir so that you're keeping the royal bloodline going or
Yeah.
whatever. But it's okay. Like most films and stories and stuff that are of ancient times don't really think through all that. But yeah, I'm glad that they're kind of introducing her. They've got pretty like good chemistry going. Um, yeah, they lots of shots of Jonathan with his shirt off for all the girl viewers, I guess. And yeah, yeah, I think that was all the stuff
Just
that I wanted to get to in this
Just
episode.
in general, I just want to like compliment the show again on all the interpersonal relationships between all the family members. I'm just like
Yeah.
very impressed by how Eshbal and each of the sisters have a different relationship, and Eshbal with Jonathan and the Saul and each of his kids has a different relationship, and it's I keep on bringing up Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones
Mm.
did that probably the best, and this is doing it as good. I think all the dynamics are delicious, is I guess the word I'd
Yeah.
use. So I'm like
Yeah, no,
excited to see where each of these storylines go.
I would really agree with you and second that. Like, when the show first started, I was like, okay, some of these characters, like, they're kind of fitting into like certain archetypes. Like, initially Eshbal, they were just kind of painting him as the dude,
Lothar.
no good, like, yeah, Lothario. But they've definitely like kind of complicated some of these characters as they've gone along and complicated some of the relationships. So, like you said, like, they're kind of surprising things, but they're like very human, very realistic in the different ways that they're interacting with each other and kind of maneuvering around each other and stuff. So yeah, I really think that I'm really impressed by the writing in the show and yeah, really excited to see how they continue to bring it all together. That's it for today for House of David Season 2, Episode 3. We'll be back next week. Thank you for joining us. If you are new to the podcast, definitely if you can subscribe and like and do all the things. If you want to support what I'm doing, I can buy me a coffee. Having members is part of what makes this possible. And so definitely consider that. My members get a few different perks like some kind of PDFs of my Bible studies and 2 monthly posts that are just for members and other stuff like that. So if you want to
Great
support the
content.
show and share kind of my content with other people, yeah, I try to really dig deep into analysis of biblical adaptations like this and help people see kind of all the biblical stuff that's going on. And so if you want to help me continue to do that, I would really appreciate it. But thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kevin, and this is Victor, and this has been the Bible Artist Podcast. Godspeed.